sushi rigs or proxy mesh are a way to kind of take your finished initial blocking and send it off to a rigger or rigging team where they can kind of slice this thing up into simple volume chunks where the joints are. So if you look at this warthog, right, at the knee where there should be a change from upper leg to lower leg, there's a split in the mesh, right? So this kind of mesh is useful in that you can have some like ultra low poly, okay, ultra low poly mesh that stands in for the final production mesh. So let's say you have a shot with dozens of characters and it gets really heavy and slow when all the character mesh that's the rendering mesh is on screen, right? Well, the good news is you can switch over to something like this, which is these big simplified chunks. And because there's not really skinning, they're almost like parented to these bones, right? So each section of the spine has a big section of the torso that represents a bone in the spine. Upper leg, it's one big chunk of mesh. Lower leg, one big chunk of mesh. The feet is basically split where the ankle is and the ball of the foot, right? So we can do this with ZBrush and do it quite efficiently. So I'll take this character here. And if there's any overlapping stuff, you know, I do have a body inside the character, for example, and I'm not sure if, yeah, I think this is still even just a placeholder, so it's not even visible in the final here. So a lot of times, anytime there's extra stuff, I'll basically delete it or turn it off. This sweater here, this is more of a look dev thing. You know, I wanted to have a knitted look, and again, it's just kind of a stand-in. But underneath is the actual topology here. And again, in production, I typically don't have mesh with thickness, but we'll take a look at that in a second. Okay, so what I basically want to do is start deciding, you know, what parts of the mesh will sort of just be overlapping or be connected together. In this case, I'll turn off the sort of fuzz layer there for the mesh. So I'll take this. I'm going to, because these shoulder pads, this is all part of the sweater, and the cuffs here, the collar. I'm basically going to start merging stuff together. So I'll go to geometry, and I'll just, if I'm using the dynamic subdivision with thickness, I'll hit apply. And in this case, you know, we don't have to be super precise. This is the inner part of the shirt. So I'm going to basically delete the inner shells here. Okay. This is just to simplify my workflow and my life. I'll go to delete hidden. And then if you want, you can even go to just close holes. That's totally fine for now. This is not representing your final production quality mesh, but we want to get a sense of these volumes basically for the sushi rig. It's also a good thing to do too, because you get to, you basically get to have the volume that's essentially done, the proportions that are done, send it to Maya and start doing the bones, right? Doing controls and all that sort of stuff. So for these different parts of the shirts, these patches here, where are they? Find the patches. There. Okay. So yeah, I'll take these patches and basically merge down from the sweater down. So I'm going to merge down. Okay. Merge down. Now, when you have things like this, if you notice there are gaps here, I typically want these gaps to go away. So you've got a few options. In this case, I could just control click with the move scale rotate tool and just drag this down to make sure there's, you know, solid contact, no gaps, right? And then I could, you know, maybe smooth this out a bit. I basically just want to make sure that this is in solid contact with the mesh underneath. And I can smooth this out a little bit. Sometimes I'll even do inflate too. So sometimes inflate can work well for that. But again, you don't want to distort too much of the underside of that mesh there. So I'm going to just, again, hold control, click on the inner part of that group, and then just pull it in. Kind of, yeah, let's see if I... Let me reset the pivot. I just want to, yeah, see if I can pull it almost straight inwards there. Also good too, because sometimes this will sort of show you that, oh, you know, there's some issues with gaps and spaces in the mesh. So that's something you will fix eventually anyways. But I basically want solid contact with all these pieces. Oh, I see. I think I was doing this, yeah, without dynamic symmetry on. So that's, sorry, without local sim on for these. There, I'll try that one more time. Nudge up, pull in. It'll clear the mask. Again, I might just do a little bit of softening here just to kind of get that to blend in better. Okay. So that's basically it. Now, these poly groupings, I would keep these. So this is like a throwaway version of this model that you're going to do. So I'm going to hit Control W. I might just hide these end groupings for now first. Control W. So this just basically gives me one big grouping. And then essentially anywhere where you think you're going to have a division, you want to basically start cutting. So I believe this model for me is essentially symmetrical, but if not, we can do this by hand asymmetrically too. It's totally fine. You want to go to slice, and basically you're going to start to slice. So typically you want a major polygroup change in the shoulders. Okay, that's a big one. At the elbow. And when you're slicing, it can be a little bit erratic, so I do recommend masking areas like the torso, just so you don't slice through it by accident. Yeah, this character is a little bit tricky too. She's like wearing her dad's sweater, and it's big and bulky and oversized for her, so her elbow is actually a bit higher than where the shoulder or the elbow pads are. So I'm going to cut a bit higher there. In this case, I will probably just mirror it, but you can, like I said, just do the same thing, but on the opposite side. If there's some asymmetry that you want to preserve, that's totally fine. So that's basically it for the arms. And then usually you have a split right at the wrist, but because I have the hands just tucked in underneath, I can basically leave them as they are. Okay. Sorry, let me go back to that shirt or that sweater. So if you Control-Shift-Click on the main torso, usually I would say for more realistic or quasi-realistic models, you'll have 5 bones for the spine. Sometimes for shorter torsoed characters or more cartoony characters, they'll have as little as 3 bones. And so again, remember what I said before, each split you're doing is going to represent a change from one bone to the next. So if I just have 3 bones, then I would say, okay, let's make this one section, 2 and 3, okay? And then if I'm doing just a really symmetrical version, I'll just go mirror and weld. Okay? Simple as that. Now, in this case, because I want my character to be a bit more realistic, I'll still kind of keep the height probably at or just below the armpits, but then I'll have a few more divisions. So again, I'm going to go for 5 here. By the way, I recommend doing this with perspective turned off. That way you don't have these weird sloping splits. Generally a good idea. So just below the armpit. And then I'll try to have some equally spaced splits here. And they can go on a bit of an arc, because typically we may draw the spine with a bit of a curvature to it. Okay. Now, like I said, if the pants are kind of intersecting this too, let me just go back here. You know, I might kind of converge these together. So let me go back and undo some of these splits. Yeah, I'll redo the splits in a second. So we'll take basically the sweater. I'm going to bring it up above the pants, and I'll go to merge down. I'll merge down with those pockets. Again, I think they are in good contact here. Yeah, they seem to be. And again, we can also just isolate these by Control-Shift-Clicking on them. And because they have polygroups front, side, and back, you can hit Control-Shift-X to expand this. And again, just quickly kind of Control-Click on that area, and then, oops, sorry. Yeah, just kind of pull it in the direction it's already facing, and then it should, oops. Yeah, make sure I'll turn on symmetry, of course. There, pull them in that direction. And then for sure you've got guaranteed contact there, okay? So, yeah, in this case too, it can also be useful to just simply dynamesh this stuff together. I'm going to keep the scarf separate because, again, you want to think about this as, you know, if you have drapery like a loincloth or a sash or something like that, and you want it to move independently, then it probably needs to remain separate. So I'm going to keep the scarf separate for this situation. But I will basically Dynamesh all this stuff together, right? So it becomes like one big solid shell. Before doing that, though, I'm going to hide the upper body stuff here just because, yeah, it's going to get a little bit messy here. So I'm going to just isolate that, and yeah, I'll make these pants just one big group, and then I'll Dynamesh this stuff together. Okay. Yeah, let's do that. Dynamesh. Okay, so like I said, I would sort of almost consider a split just below here. And I'll turn off the line so we can sort of see just the color coding. So I'll isolate this. Let's go to solo for a second. And again, we'll start to slice for our... And yeah, this kind of color coding here is changing. So I'll show you how I would fix that. I'm just going to basically isolate everything but this. Oops. Sorry, let me do my mirror and weld here to fix the asymmetry in this case. And there, I'll just hide that area, and then I just want to regroup this end part here. Oh, yeah, keep this in mind too. So I've got these floating groups from when I close the holes of the sleeves. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll basically just mask these things here and just group them on their own. So Control W splits that, and then I can isolate that and hit Control W. So now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections for the upper spine. Okay, upper lower arm. For typically, you know, the pants, the groin area, that sort of thing, I'll go to slice curve, and you want to think about like tighty whitey underwear essentially. So something along these lines. Again, if we go to mirror and weld, oops, I'll just unhide again. Mirror and weld, right? So you get that. These are again low riding pants, so I would typically have them be higher on a character, but in this case, this is okay. Again, we want roughly a split at the knees, so anywhere where there's going to be a joint change, right? That's where the splits happen. Lastly, I'll deal with the boots. These boots, again, don't think of these as the actual final production model. This is like a temporary stand-in model. So they have different polygroups. Just make them one group. Figure out where the ankle is, split there. Split at the ball of the foot, which I've already got kind of strategically placed in the boot, but for now it's just fine if it's rough like this. And that's that. Let's get out of solo for a second. I'll hide this thing. So for the scarf, let me just solo that. I'm going to go to line mode. So it is a little bit lower poly. I'm just going to delete higher. So again, most of this I want to be stuck. So basically from here, this green portion is going to be what's basically skinned to the upper shoulder. So it's always going to move with it. And then I'm debating, you know, basically that I want to have 3, 4, maybe 5 bones that will allow this to kind of like swing left to right, forwards and backwards. Okay. So again, these blue areas would be where a bone would be placed. The blue, then the dark green, then the forest green, and then this kind of yellow color. Okay. And again, I often will just either, you know, Z-remesh this to quite low poly. By the way, if you remesh with groups and you want to keep them on and they disappear, if that ever happens, you may have to turn off the paint icon on your subtool itself. It's a little paintbrush looking thing next to the eyeball. Sometimes that happens where you lose polygroups. If that does happen with Dynameshing or Z-remeshing, that's what you have to do, is just disable that. Okay, so I'll remesh this again. Pretty low. I don't need it to be super high poly. Okay. Get out of solo. For the face and everything else, we don't need the face to be polished and clean, and you can in fact just, again, temporarily merge the eyebrows, the eyeballs, that's fine. Because again, we're thinking about it as a placeholder mesh until we get the real production mesh in. So I can say merge down, merge the brows, merge the eyeballs, and then I would literally just Dynamesh this to something very, very simple. Literally that is totally fine. And typically, again, for head and neck, if we're looking at polygrouping, we want to slice just below the sort of jawline. And then you probably want to have one more split in the neck, and then maybe, let me just solo for a second, and then maybe one just kind of above the collarbone, okay? So you can have some twist and rotation in your neck. And again, we can just Z-remesh this. I'll turn this off. I'll say, yeah, maybe just do half the poly count, keep the poly groups, Z-remesh. Again, this stuff should be pretty low, so I'm going to get it down quite low, quite simple. Hands, by the way, so again, anywhere where there's a finger joint. So these are my rough poly groups for the fingers, but I will often split these, and I'll show you some tricks to get these to split fast. If you go with select lasso, you can go in and basically isolate pretty much the last 2 loops of each finger, like so, and then hit Control W, or just hit auto group. Auto grouping is a bit more useful because it will, this is under poly groups, or in my custom interface, it's over here, auto group. So each tip gets its own, its own poly grouping. Just hide those off. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing here. Usually the middle chunk of the finger is a bit bigger than the end. The ends are usually really short. There. Auto group. And then the same thing with the thumb here. So we'll have kind of a shorter end section. Control W. We have a section here. Control W. And for the palm, you typically have a bit of a split as well. So you might have a, kind of a grouping in here, let's say. It's a bit short, actually. Yeah, let's go up here. Nope, still too short. Yeah, I'll take it way up into here, actually. Yeah, that's probably good. Okay. So that part is done. I think everything else, the hair for me is basically done. Although I think, yeah, I've got, you can sort of see here different groupings. Sorry, let me just turn off colorize there. Right, I want each one of these to have their own grouping, so I'm just going to go in and say auto group. So each chunk will be its own solid group, and then if I know I want to put maybe 2 or 3 bones, again, you think about where those bones would be. Again, I'll use the slice tool. What I love about slice is that it will just kind of cut through all of your polygroups at once and create new groupings out of them. There. So now we'd have up to 3 bones. 1, 2, 3, right? For each one of these. And if you do want to just do a quick remesh, just say keep groups, half the poly count, and you can turn down or turn off smooth groups, and then that should give you like pretty decent mesh overall. Okay, so it's about the same. There we go. Yeah, with these hands, by the way, I should mention this too. I think I have an insert IMM hand brush that actually has all the digit groupings already. I just don't remember exactly where I put it. I think it's in XMD. So it's probably in the D drive. So if you were to just like grab that brush, it's already pre-grouped instead of you having to regroup it. Yeah, if I just go into hand, double click this. Let me just drag it out onto something else generic here. Yeah, if you drag it out, you see actually all the small digits are placed more correctly. Okay, so that's a bit more useful. Okay, so the way this basically works now is that I've got all the polygroups. If you want to see them all in one shot, it's not always easy to do that when you've got all these separate subtools, but if you hit BPR, it'll show you, hey, these are all the groupings, okay? Let me go back to the main body because it is still very high poly, and the point of this is to get it into Maya at very low poly. So I'm going to just turn this off. Instead of going in half and in half, you can also just take your target poly count, set it to like 10, 15,000 polys, hit Z-remesh with keep groups on, and this will give you a fairly good, fairly clean model to work from. Okay, so there's your approximate mesh here. Now the next step might be what? I'm going to just hit BPR to check everything. Right, so all these just splits are representing where bone joints are going to be. I'm going to just group this as one group here. Oh yeah, I think this is, yeah, I still have dynamic on, so I'm going to hit apply and then just hit Control W. There we go. So what I like to do at this point to make it a little bit easier to manage is to go to Merge Visible. When you hit that, it actually creates a whole new tool, which will be called Merged, whatever the character thing is called. So this is the fully merged version. So for my submission, all you have to do at this point, basically take it to a side view, turn on some perspective, make sure your movie settings are set up properly, turntable. Okay? That's done for me. What I'm going to show you is how to actually send this to Maya, how to get it ready for actual rigging. So at this stage, what I like to do next is to basically go down into split, and I'll say group split. Okay. And anything that's left symmetrical, like let's say the bottoms of the legs, the tops of the legs, I will also go back and do a split to parts. So anything that you see a pair of in here, like, you know, this, what do you call it? The the scarf, I may want 2 bone chains in there maybe. Although it makes sense maybe with just them matching. So I'll leave those alone. But yeah, let me check the arms. So I'll go to the arms. I'll go to split to parts. And I'll show you why this is important in a moment. Upper arms, split to parts, so that each one of these gets its own chunk, okay? Split to parts. Split to parts. There we go. Yeah, and I think the fingers are, it looks like they're already done well, which is good. Okay, so that's basically it. So now each one of these is its own subtool. So usually what I like to do, let me just make sure everything's turned on. It looks like one section was turned off, or 2 sections. There we go. Turn those on. Next up, what I generally like to do is basically say all. There's Go Z up here. So you have Go Z, which sends a single subtool, all, which will send all, or visible. And if Go Z isn't working, I'll show you a bit of a workaround, because Go Z is very patchy. So I'll hit all. It should cycle through all the parts and then start to launch Maya. Well, this is kind of good. So the reason I do the group split and then split to parts is that I want each section to basically be floating on its own. Left side, right side. Yeah, I think I forgot the upper legs in this case. And sometimes too, when you have enough little sections like this, it can get really kind of broken. So if that happens, I have a few different workarounds. Workaround 1 is to basically go into... you can actually go just, I have a plugin set up here called GN Import Export. It's used quite a bit actually. So you can say GN Import Export and you can say all or visible. I'll say all export. So you'll see it kind of cycle through all the different subtools. I do wonder, there's probably a naming conflict somewhere in there, which might be why it's only showing, not showing all the parts. But I've also noticed when you have a lot of subtools and you're Go-Zing back and forth, it can get very buggy with this. Go-Z is a great tool when it works and a freaking nightmare when it doesn't. So, yeah, we'll let this fly through. And then I'm going to just reset this. I'll just go to a new scene. It's a very simple plugin. You basically, yeah, I'll just hit import. Hopefully, actually, I should have double checked that it was done here. But there. So now you see everything's actually come in correctly, right? So I do recommend, you know, if you can, move your character with its feet firmly on the ground plane. That would be ideal. Another thing we should do, which I do with the bonus tools here, is go to bonus tools, modify 0 pivots. So I'll go move pivot to base and 0 local value. So that puts the pivot like dead center of the world, pretty much on the ground. Okay. Now, what's great about this is that, I didn't actually want it to come in merged as one object though, but let's see about that. Yeah, if it's coming in, I should double check my import settings here. Multi-file, yeah, let me try that again. So I'll delete this and go to GN import and say import as multi-file. Hold on, let's try that. I may have to go back and re-export from here though and see if that works. So I'll go to the export under options. I think that's fine. Oh yeah, multi-file export. There we go. Okay, so now with the multi, let me just double check this again. Imports, and it should bring them all in, all the different individual chunks. Perfect. Again, I'm still having a weird issue with some of these parts missing. So again, if there's issues like this, a final workaround for this is to basically go into Z plugin. This might be the safest one. Go to FBX export, visible or all. You could say all. Yeah, I don't need to worry about cameras and stuff. I'll just go to exports. FBX exported. Let's go to imports. There we go. And there's the full character. There we go. Okay, finally. You know, glitches that happen in production, right? Yeah, it's a good question. Is FBX versus GoZ the same? The thing I like about GoZ is that it's typically live. So if you're in Maya, you're like, oh, I want to tweak this, but then send it back to ZBrush. It's one click, and when it works, it just updates and brings it back. In this case, I don't really care. So an FBX export, if it works best, then that's what I'm going to use. Typically, GoZ is ideal when you're unwrapping, and sometimes I'll do a quick start with polygroups and doing the UV master in ZBrush. Then I GoZ it to Maya, right? Re-unfold it, tweak the shells, and then I bring it back to bake textures. So it's good for that kind of quick import-export. It's almost like a live connection between the two softwares, but again, depending on what version of Maya you have and what version of ZBrush you have, it can get very disconnected and kind of buggy. But in this case, yes, now I've got each individual patch, okay? Each individual grouping. And what I will typically do, we can grab all this stuff. Let's go to a layer. I'm going to say create layer was selected. And then we can turn this into a reference layer. And then let's say in the top view, all right, now we start kind of drawing our bones. Go to modeling, sorry, not modeling, rigging, skeleton, create joints, all right? So this is why we want to have a bend at the elbows. We kind of put the joint back there. I usually start this from a top view, or at least the old school method I've learned is that we start from a top view. So typically we want to place the, yeah, I might have actually put it too far wide. So I'll put this up here, and then I'm going to rotate this. Yeah, I'll rotate this on the object level. You want to keep your upper and lower arm bone in line, so you want to move these in the object level, okay? So that we're not, you're not breaking the plane. As soon as you move this off of this direction, I have a bend now from a top view, right? Which is good, but then I have one from another angle, which is very bad. You only want to have one rotational axis, mainly because that's what informs the IK chain that drives the arm, how it should bend and how it should rotate, okay? Now, I may actually rotate in world. Sometimes I find that a bit easier for this early placement, and I'm going to just turn off my step snap, because I do want the wrist to kind of sit right by roughly where the hand is, okay? Okay, let's go to reference. There we go. So the elbow is going to be right about there. And I think the wrist is about fine where it is. Yeah, that seems about right. So what's kind of great about this, and I'll just show you. So the whole point of all this is that, now we can take something like the this upper arm, okay? I'll drag it down here. And I can even just kind of like lazy parent this stuff to the kind of correct bone. And now if I'm grabbing, here, let me just isolate these three. Okay, so if I go to skeleton, or, yes. Go to IK chain, create IK handle. Is that right? Sorry, one sec. Yeah, now I've got this thing driving, right? So I'm going to just unhide everything. Display, show all. Right, so now very quickly I'm like, okay, I can actually see where the volumes are moving, right? And because it's basically, parented, and Allison's going to show you a better way to do this, but right away, even though, you might have refinement and other stuff to do on the model, because you've got the big and medium volumes blocked out, the proportions are roughly set, you can already start to get your rig going, and then that much more quickly get your animation started and start blocking as well. So this is a very, very valuable process. And like I said, you could actually still use this low poly, this ultra low poly mesh as a way to speed up your viewport. So if your actual production mesh that comes in later, that is properly skinned and more of a single shell, right? If that starts to bog down your scene, well, you can turn that layer of mesh off and then turn this layer of mesh on. And that's why it's a proxy. A proxy, I don't know if you know what the word means, but it's basically like a substitute, right? A substitute for something else. Okay, does